Greetings, Starfighters, and welcome to Shameless Cashgrab Second Opinions. I'm Morgan,
And I'm Robin.
formerly of Geek of All Trades.
And we're here to add our 2 cents worth on the films Arkle rated as best of set for the first 6 seasons.
Number one, The Last Man on Earth.
Oh man, The Last Man on Earth. This is just. Yeah, it's definitely a flawed movie. It could definitely use some improvement in terms of, pacing and lighting and stuff like that. But at the same time, they were filming in a lot of locations they weren't supposed to and dealing with police and everything like that. But, Vincent Price, he's a legend for a reason, and this movie is an example of why he's like that. This movie influenced so much that came after it, including, George Romero and Night of the Living Dead. Romero has said straight up that he based his zombies on the vampires from The Last Man on Earth. It is definitely probably the most faithful adaptation of I Am Legend. And, it's just a good movie. I really enjoyed watching it. I don't know if I would go so far as to say it's better than Nosferatu, to be honest, but I had more fun watching it. And again, anytime you get Vincent Price in your movie, you're getting bonus points right there. And not only was he in this, he was the lead. He's like the only character with dialogue for much of it. And he carries the weight of just, being just, a lonely man in a post-apocalyptic world. He carries it so well. He is honestly a much better actor than I think even some of his fans appreciate. So yeah, Last Man on Earth, number one best movie of Undead the Vampire Collection.
Okay, Season 3, The Undead Vampire Collection. Poor Arkle had to sit through 20 movies of varying quality. And if I remember editing that season correctly, most of them fell on the low end. There were several films that could have been worst of set. But we're not here to talk about the worst of set. We're here to talk about the best of set.
Yeah. And this is the only other collection in these six where I've seen any of the other films, and that's Nosferatu. And, well, Nosferatu, as he mentions, is a classic for a reason. And yet, I'm not sure if I disagree with him putting this one above Nosferatu. I mean, Nosferatu is also, I think, somewhat overrated, but we liked this film.
It was... Sometimes a movie is important not because it was good, but because it was seminal. I mean, I think we get into that with this one.
Yeah. Because this one, in its own way, wasn't as seminal to filmmaking as Nosferatu was. Arkle mentions that George Romero designed his zombies in Night of the Living Dead after the Shambler vampires in this movie. So the entire zombie...
and Night of the Living Dead kind of started the whole...
zombie genre,
which
as we know
I think
it, in
has
the modern...
gone way over. I don't know what the thing is,
I think
why
it's
everybody...
I think it's dialed back in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
A real-life pandemic will do that.
That is sadly true. The seasons 3, 4, and 5 sets... we had our notes were much shorter. We didn't have as much to say. I think that's because we didn't feel as strongly one way or the other about these.
And they're solid movies to some degree or another. Neither of them are great or terrible.
I would say of those three, which is the best ones from the vampire set, the action set, and the mobster set, I would definitely say this is the best of the three.
Yeah, overall, because the Killing Machine definitely had some great moments, but we'll get to that when we talk about that movie.
In our next episode.
Yes. But The Last Man on Earth is just, this is, doing these not quite in order, this is my first time seeing any version of this story. I've never seen The Omega Man, I've never seen I Am Legend, or read the original novel. So this is my first direct contact with the story, though I've heard a lot about it over the years.
Yeah, now I had seen Omega Man, the Charlton Heston version of this, more years ago than I want to admit, boys and girls. And my father has had, well, the collection's still there, Dad's gone, but an extensive science fiction collection, like thousands, literally thousands of science fiction books. I could read science fiction for years without going anywhere but his garage to get the books. So this was one of those, hey, this came from a book. Hey, Dad, you got the book? Yeah, you got the book. Okay, I'm going to read the book because I didn't have to go to the library for it. I don't really remember either of those very well. And I never got around to seeing the Will Smith version. That wasn't I don't want to see this. It was just never got around to watching it.
Not a priority.
Yeah. So both of us came to this with little or no memory of the later versions.
Right.
I think part of why this movie would not be made today.
No.
Because filmmaking has changed, and there is no way that a movie with this slow of pacing would get made. People would want to sex it up and make more action, which is probably what they did with the Will Smith version.
Yeah, right. But halfway through, it feels like they've covered what would be in the first third or less of a newer film. I actually don't think that's necessarily a bad thing in this case. They established the world as it is, and then doing this long, extended to like the middle third of the film flashback as to how we got here. And I think it's a testament to how well this film is put together as a whole, that doesn't wreck the film.
Yeah.
Because by the time you get to that flashback, I at least wanted to know how we got here. And it did feel a little long for the flashback, but not so much as to be disruptive.
Yeah, because, and it answered a lot of questions that the movie had already raised to that point. Like, the one guy who's banging on the door going, Morgan, which always felt weird to me.
Morgan.
It's the guy's last name, Bill Morgan.
Yeah.
The guy's beating on the, Morgan, come out, Morgan, we're going to get you. It's like, okay, obviously this guy knows him. He's calling him by name. He shows up here every night to pound on the door and call him by name. What is the pre-existing relationship between these people? And we get that answer.
Right.
The transfer did have its production problems. When we first started watching it, it's like, why is this a tiny little screen in the middle of the window? We're watching it on the computer, and somebody had added space above and below so that you got, rather than cropping the sides to make it fit 4:3, they added, they letterboxed it so that you had the whole film. Well, then the player is going, it's this tall, so I'm going to add all this black space on the sides. And so we ended up with the actual movie taking up this little tiny window in the middle of the screen. I basically had to use the zoom on the player to get the movie itself into something that resembled full screen. So that's just, they could have fixed that in the transfer, and they didn't, and these are cheap sets for a reason.
Yeah, I mean, most TVs are letterboxed now, and I don't think the sets are that old, the set as it's put together now. So clearly they used an old transfer and didn't bother to fix it.
Yeah, and that's a recurring theme in these sets, that sometimes the transfer is bad, sometimes there's choppy editing.
Yeah. But that's really not the fault of the film.
That is not the fault of the film.
That's just a...
if you could find a good copy of this somewhere, it's definitely worth it.
Yeah. And the reason for that is basically, as Arkle said, Vincent Price's acting. He has to carry this whole film a little like Atlas, the last man on Earth. He's carrying the whole story on his shoulders. Now, the flashback lets him actually emote and act with other characters, and you get to see how this very logical figure has broken down. It's really interesting and really well done. He'll sort of go back and forth between, I am a machine, I am a robot, I have to survive, I have to find out if there are any other humans out there. And then he'll have these breakdowns. And while it is acting in the 1960s style, there's a certain amount of broad acting to it. Vincent Price really adds this pathos. Yeah. He really grounds it, and you see how this man of science, this man of logic and reason, I could almost imagine his performance inspiring a little bit of Mr. Spock if Leonard Nimoy had ever seen it. Yeah. And given what a film nerd Leonard Nimoy was, he might have.
Yeah, probably more 50s filmmaking, because the movie was in 1960s, so we really hadn't gotten into 60s yet.
Well, I think that was actually inaccurate, that it was actually in 63 or 64. But yes, it is a very 50s film. It's in black and white. About the only thing that isn't 50s is I don't think the men are wearing hats, but the culture and the behavior, and aside from there's actually a couple of strong women.
The flashbacks are pretty clearly Kennedy era.
Yeah. There's a couple of really strong women, which is nice, but they're still strong women by late 50s, early 60s standards.
Yeah.
And the whole culture is very 50s. And, well, he's a 50s scientist, so...
Yeah.
I do like that they didn't make the blonde guy the hero, that he was actually this he was zombified.
Yeah. And, well, what have we learned the past few years, boys and girls? Every disaster movie starts with the people in authority ignoring the scientists.
And that only adds to the tragedy. I've got this note here about this. You were the scientist who... Imagine if Jor-El was the only survivor of Krypton.
And he'd been living by himself for 3 years.
Yes. 30 days of night, walk it off, son. Try 3 years of it.
Yeah. With, listening to zombies pounding on his door every night, howling for his blood,
Literally.
Brains, whatever it is
Blood,
they
they're
wanted from
vampires.
him. Yeah.
Brains would come later.
Yeah, that was I was like, so the movie opens where you see all these shots of different buildings and bodies, like people who've just dropped on the steps or whatever. And I'm like, if it's been 3 years, those bodies all look like they're in pretty good shape. Well, then we find out why they're in pretty good shape, because they get up and walk around every night.
Well, some of them do, because
and also
he
some
notes,
of them are some of them are fresh because.
Yeah, there's only one man left on Earth. What are the vampires feeding on? Other vampires. He specifically says the strong feed on the weak.
So that's those all will look pretty well preserved. Oh, okay, they explained it.
Yeah.
Good. There's a lot of little things. Overall, it's a good film.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of little things that are like, wait a minute, why doesn't the person just...
Yeah.
And
yeah, for me, it was why didn't he stay in the chapel instead of trying to go home? We've established at this point that whether it's psychological or magical, they stay away from things that repel vampires, garlic and mirrors, and they do seem to avoid the crosses for the most part. At least the zombie vampires.
Yeah.
And he's in a church that is covered in crosses. Now, he's not being irrational.
It's the chapel of the cemetery, but
Right,
it's functionally the same thing. It's a sacred place.
Yeah. And he's distraught. He's weeping over his wife. But still, he goes out and fist fights these zombie vampires. If one thing had gone wrong, the film would have ended like a third of the way in.
Because and they trashed his car.
Yeah.
Because he didn't have time to get home and get it into the garage.
Yeah. Although that clearly wasn't a big deal. He basically, he's the only person left. He just literally
walks down to the used car lot, picks out a new car. And
new cars.
Yeah, picks out a new car, and I'm like, yeah, don't get a convertible, dude. It won't end well. I think he says something about that. There was a time when he would have wanted to get a convertible.
But now, but he doesn't. He almost doesn't care about comfort anymore.
But yeah, it's like, oh, I'm in this safe place, and the sun's going down. I better risk going outside to go home.
But the sun was already down.
Yeah.
So again, he's distraught. But given how logical he is most of the time, it did seem like a bit of an oddity that he would choose this moment to be stupid. It's pretty clear that it was a plot. They needed him back in the house for the flashback, basically.
Yeah. Speaking of the flashbacks, there's another one I didn't make a note about here. Just another one of those little things. The virus that causes the zombie thing has you go blind first. And their daughters go, Mommy, I can't see. Mommy, where are you? Mommy, I can't see. And Mommy's sitting right there, and Mommy and Daddy are talking to each other. Yeah. And, my instinct as a mother, if your child is going, Mommy, where are you? You don't turn to somebody else in the room and go, oh, this is terrible. You take their hand and say, I'm right here, honey.
Yeah,
and
if she's only blind, she can hear and she can feel. Since Mom was obviously not being overly careful about biological barriers at that point.
Well, they didn't really know what they were still trying to figure out what caused it. It's weird that I don't think they ever said airborne. They always said it's on the wind.
But that means airborne.
I know, but
probably trying to explain airborne to laymen. So.
Yeah,
and
speaking of airborne, watching that movie. Now, 2 years into the pandemic, it's a different world than when Arkle recorded his season wrap-up in October of 2019 in the before times.
Yeah. I mean, none of us are the last person on Earth, but...
And thankfully, COVID, it's horrible how many people have died, but on the other hand, they've all stayed dead.
Yeah, all the zombies are still alive.
Yeah. And
Don't take the vaccine. Inject bleach. Use ivermectin instead.
Arkle doesn't shy away from politics. I see no reason why we should. Yeah. No. Especially when it's like, Yeah. Keep your distance from anybody who might not be vaccinated.
Yeah.
Wash your hands, wear a mask, and get vaccinated and boosted. Liberal tears are one thing, but the liberal tears on this are because we're crying over needless death and suffering, and even if it's the death and suffering of people we don't really like, we still don't want to see them die.
Yeah, and well, innocent people do get caught in this. The blonde guy turns into a zombie, but he's not a villain. I mean, he's a little nuts, but he's also not wrong about the vampire thing. He's a tragic victim of this thing, and well, there's a lot of tragic victims of COVID in real life who did do everything right.
Just as Arkle has been ending his show with since this mess started. Be careful out there.
Yeah, because well, the way this movie ends is really an object lesson.
Yeah. You covered the slow burn part already. So, yeah. Towards the end of the movie, it's just everybody's being stupid. People,
except the one woman that he helps. She's gotten over her stupidity, but no one listens to her because, of course, not.
That's true. At least she tries. But in most cases, there are several places in the climax of the film where if somebody had said something, no, wait, I am this, or no, wait, he's, or we're doing this because, or if somebody had spoken up, it didn't have to be the tragedy that it was. And that's poor communication kills.
Although I want to note that that's not bad writing. At this point, Vincent Price's character, Morgan, he's basically having a break. I don't want to call it a psychotic break, but basically the stress has gotten to him. He finally met this person. He thinks he's got another human being, but she's infected, and there's this whole disaster, and all these people want to kill Morgan.
But he's also had that, he's figured out he can fix it now.
Yeah, but the thing is that the people that he can help are shooting at him. And that rant he makes at the end, he is clearly not he's clearly not really feeling all that sympathetic.
Yeah, but if at the beginning of the sequence, if he had done no wait instead of just shooting back and not talking to them.
Yes, but the thing is, it's not that he's not being stupid. He is. What I'm saying is that his stupidity makes sense in context because he is just such a hot mess at that point. The up and down, the emotional up and down.
Yeah, the further you get into the sequence, the easier it is.
Yeah.
At the beginning of the sequence, I think that it's not quite as in play. But eventually it's just everybody's being stupid and people die and...
Yeah.
It could be the fridge horror of now they're all going to, now they're all at risk. But in theory,
Ruth has the...
In theory now the woman has the immunity and she can spread it around. But
and, well, any of them who decide to get a late night snack off of Morgan's corpse will be immune too. So
well, we don't know what it'll do to somebody who's fully gone.
Well, but those guys are those people aren't fully gone.
True. But they're also not as likely to do the late night snack thing. So again, this was comparing this to the other 19 films, we can only compare it to one of the other 19.
And I think it says it speaks well to this film that it can be compared fairly to Nosferatu, another titan of the genre. So
worth a watch, but with the caveat of recognizing that it is a film of its era and you can't really judge it by modern filmmaking standards.
Because it is surprising. I mean, there are no people of color, I think, so there's that, but it was made in the 60s with a 50s lens, metaphorically speaking. So, and Vincent Price. So it's not like it's not...
Yeah, it's worth it just for Vincent Price.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
So that's it for the Season 3 episode of Second Opinions.
Yep. Greetings, Starfighters. Robin here again to make a shameless book plug for Discami Publishing's Absolute Power, a modern superhero tabletop RPG supporting adventures across the entire power level spectrum. I'm happy to be the lead writer on this sequel to Silver Age Sentinels, with mighty Mark McKinnon presenting the most robust version of Tristat's 4th edition to date. The Kickstarter for Absolute Power launches on February 8th. The link is in the show notes. Please look forward to it!